Okay, let's dive right in. Just picture this for a second. You walk into a bakery, right? And a single loaf of everyday bread costs you exactly 200 billion marks. I mean, it sounds completely absurd, like some kind of wild dystopian fiction, doesn't it?
But, well, this wasn't fiction. This extreme economic reality was the actual lived situation in Germany, right before the world spiraled into the most devastating conflict in human history, World War II. You know, almost every geopolitical border and international relationship we navigate today, yeah, it was forged in the fires of this very conflict.
So, welcome to today's explainer, The Catalyst of Chaos, the origins of World War II. We're going to go back to exactly where and how the very first domino fell. Part 1, The Price of Peace, the Treaty of Versailles. To really get a grip on this war, we've got to pivot back to 1919. It all starts with Article 231, which is often called the War Guilt Clause. And let me tell you, this was not some gentle peace agreement. It explicitly forced Germany to take full blame for all of World War I. It essentially told an entire nation, everything that just happened is entirely your fault, and you are going to pay for it. And the sheer weight of that burden was just crushing. The penalty assessed in 1921 was $33 billion. To put that into perspective, in today's money, that's an astronomical $270 billion. That is a sum so massive that Germany didn't actually finish paying it off until 2010. Crazy, right? So, tracing this on a timeline, you can clearly see the disastrous reaction. To keep up with these impossible payments, the government resorted to some pretty desperate money printing, and this directly caused the hyperinflation that culminated in 1923, forcing ordinary, everyday citizens to literally carry wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy basic groceries. Moving into part 2, Rise of a Dictator, Desperation to Power. Now, a country in this state of absolute desperation is basically the perfect breeding ground for manipulative strongman. When people are humiliated and struggling just to survive week to week, they look for radical solutions. The situation compounded dramatically by 1929 when the Great Depression hit. Suddenly, a staggering 6 million people in Germany were unemployed. Poverty was rampant, and children were literally starving in the streets. And enter Adolf Hitler. Seizing on all that public anger, he capitalized on the crisis to become dictator by 1933. He completely weaponized propaganda, aggressively pushing this dark, radical vision of a racially pure Aryan state that required what he called Lebensraum, or living space, to expand and dominate. Which brings us to part 3, breaking the rules, military buildup. Blatantly ignoring the Treaty of Versailles, Hitler started secretly rebuilding his military, while the rest of the world, well, mostly just watched. By early 1938, he absorbed Austria without even firing a single shot. Next up, he exploited the appeasement strategy of the British, taking the ceded land in a desperate bid for peace. But within a year, he completely broke his promise and violently swallowed the rest of Czechoslovakia. The tipping point finally arrived on September 1, 1939. Hitler ordered the full-scale invasion of Poland. For Britain and France, who had repeatedly tried using diplomacy, this blatant act of aggression was the absolute final straw. World War II had officially begun. Part 4, The Lightning War, a terrifying new tactic. Now, you have to realize this wasn't a repeat of the slow, grinding trench warfare of World War I. No, this was Blitzkrieg, which translates directly to lightning war. It utilized rapid, highly coordinated attacks, combining heavy tanks on the ground with relentless air forces from above. This strategy completely paralyzed enemy defenses before they could even react. But here is a truly wild and honestly often overlooked fact driving that speed. The German soldiers executing this maneuver were actively issued a drug called Pervitin. And what is that? Well, today we know it as crystal meth. This chemically allowed the soldiers to fight relentlessly for days on end without sleeping. Absolutely insane. On to part 5, the fall of France, a shocking collapse. Emboldened by these swift victories in the east, Hitler turned his sights west. On one hand, you had France's Maginot Line, these massive, state-of-the-art defensive fortifications.
On the other hand, you had Hitler's master plan. He created a massive distraction at the expected border while simultaneously sneaking 40,000 military vehicles right through the Ardennes forest. And that was an area the Allies had fatally dismissed as completely impenetrable.
Part 6. Miracle at Dunkirk, Operation Dynamo.
So, because of that Ardennes maneuver, Allied forces found themselves completely surrounded and physically trapped with their backs against the sea on the beaches of Dunkirk. It looks like the undeniable end. But out of that total despair came Operation Dynamo. An incredible 350,000 soldiers were miraculously evacuated across the English Channel. And this was done by a makeshift patchwork fleet of military ships and literally everyday private fishing boats.
Let's take a second to look at the chilling reality at this point in history. France had surrendered. Hitler controlled almost the entirety of the European continent. The US was not yet involved, and Britain stood almost entirely alone against an expanding tide of chaos. Honestly, Hitler seemed completely unstoppable.
It's a profound reminder of how rapidly global stability can just crumble when economic despair and manipulated hatred take root. And well, that brings us to the end of this explainer. Looking at the overwhelming position of the Axis powers at this stage, I've got a question for you before we get to part 2. What do you think was the single biggest mistake the Allies made in these early days? Was it the Treaty of Versailles? Appeasement? Let us know what you think, and I'll see you in the next explainer.